Imagine living near a border where the sound of gunfire replaces birdsong, where families flee with nothing but memories, and where every sunrise brings uncertainty. This is not just a story of two nations, it is the story of survival, conflict, and the invisible wounds left behind by the battle between Cambodia and Thailand in the late 20th century. Southeast Asia was a region of shifting powers, post-colonial struggles, and deep ideological divisions. Cambodia, once a peaceful kingdom, descended into chaos after years of instability. The Vietnam War had spilled over into Cambodian territory during the 1960s and early 1970s, and in 1975, the Khmer Rouge came to power. Under Pol Pot, the country suffered a brutal genocide, as the regime attempted to transform society through extreme agrarian socialism. Nearly 2 million people died in just 4 years. By 1979, the Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia, toppling the Khmer Rouge and installing a new government made up of Khmer Rouge defectors and communists loyal to Hanoi. This move angered China and caused unease in neighboring Thailand, which shared a long border with Cambodia, Thailand, backed by Western allies such as the United States, opposed Vietnam's occupation of Cambodia. This aligned with broader Cold War dynamics, where the region became a proxy battlefield between rival ideologies, capitalism, and communism. Refugees began pouring into Thailand, many fleeing from violence or the devastation left by years of war and famine. Khmer Rouge fighters who survived Vietnam's attack regrouped near the Thai border and began launching guerrilla operations. As Vietnamese forces pursued them, tensions rose with Thailand, whose military faced repeated cross-border incursions and shelling. Though not officially at war, Thailand found itself entangled in the violence, attempting to defend its sovereignty, while managing an overwhelming humanitarian crisis. The situation was further complicated by the presence of other resistance groups, international aid agencies, and covert foreign support, all operating in the border areas. This period was marked by a fragile balance, where military actions, refugee movements, and international politics were deeply intertwined, making the Cambodia-Thailand conflict one of the most complex regional struggles of the post-Vietnam War era. After being overthrown by the Vietnamese invasion in 1979, the Khmer Rouge retreated from the Cambodian capital and established strongholds along the remote jungles and mountainous areas near the Thai-Cambodian border. Despite their fall from power, they did not disappear. Instead, they reorganized as a guerrilla resistance movement, determined to regain control of Cambodia. Backed covertly by international actors such as China and, indirectly, some Western powers due to Cold War strategic interests, the Khmer Rouge became a persistent, destabilizing force in the region. From their border bases, they launched frequent attacks against the Vietnamese-installed government in Phnom Penh and often engaged in cross-border raids that violated Thai territory. The Thai government, while not officially allied with the Khmer Rouge, tolerated their presence near the border due to shared opposition to Vietnamese occupation. This led to a complicated situation in which Thai military forces had to patrol a frontier constantly under pressure from both Khmer Rouge activity and Vietnamese counterattacks. The Khmer Rouge utilized refugee camps near the border as recruitment grounds, blending into civilian populations and manipulating humanitarian corridors to maintain their operations. Their fighters were experienced, brutal, and deeply committed to a radical vision of Cambodia's future, which made them difficult to defeat. The presence of the Khmer Rouge along the Thai border turned the area into a volatile conflict zone. Thai villages and military outposts occasionally came under fire, and the Thai government was forced to respond with artillery and air support to repel incursions. The Khmer Rouge's ability to survive and operate after their fall from national power is a key reason why the Cambodian conflict dragged on into the 1980s and 1990s. Their role in perpetuating the violence, manipulating external support, and threatening regional stability left a lasting legacy on Cambodia and its neighbors. Thailand's position during the Cambodia conflict was shaped by a mix of national security concerns, geopolitical strategy, and regional instability. Though not directly involved in the Cambodian Civil War, Thailand found itself on the front lines of a complex situation. The fall of the Khmer Rouge in 1979 and the subsequent Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia placed a communist military presence directly on Thailand's eastern border. This was seen by Thai leaders as a significant threat, especially within the broader Cold War context where Thailand was aligned with the West and wary of growing Vietnamese and Soviet influence in Southeast Asia. Thailand's policy was guided by a desire to preserve its sovereignty and prevent the spread of communism. As Vietnamese troops pushed into western Cambodia and began attacking Khmer Rouge strongholds near the Thai border, Thai military units were often drawn into border skirmishes. Thailand increased its troop presence in the region, built defensive positions, and sometimes responded with artillery and airstrikes when its territory was violated. At the same time, Thailand allowed several anti-Vietnamese resistance groups, including remnants of the Khmer Rouge, to operate near or within its borders. Though officially denying any alliance, another key aspect of Thailand's position was the massive humanitarian crisis it faced. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodian refugees fled to Thailand, seeking safety from the ongoing conflict. Temporary camps were set up along the border, and Thailand worked with international organizations to provide aid. However, these camps also became breeding grounds for insurgent activity, and Thai forces had to navigate the difficult task of separating civilians from fighters. Balancing military defense, humanitarian responsibility, and Cold War alliances placed Thailand in a uniquely precarious position. It became both a shield against communism and a reluctant host to a conflict it did not initiate but could not ignore. Vietnam's involvement in Cambodia was one of the most significant turning points in Southeast Asia's post-colonial history. After enduring years of border attacks from the Khmer Rouge, including a massacre in Bachch that killed thousands of Vietnamese civilians, Vietnam launched a full-scale invasion of Cambodia in December 1978. In a swift campaign, Vietnamese forces captured Phnom Penh in early January 1979 and overthrew the Khmer Rouge regime. Vietnam then installed the People's Republic of Kampuchea, a new government led by Cambodian communists who had defected from Pol Pot's movement and aligned themselves with Hanoi, Vietnam. Justified its intervention as a liberation effort to stop the genocide and restore order in Cambodia. However, many neighboring countries, including Thailand, and international actors like China and the United States, viewed the occupation as an expansion of Vietnamese and Soviet influence in the region. The presence of over 100,000 Vietnamese troops in Cambodia alarmed Thailand, which now faced a hostile military force close to its border. Skirmishes between Vietnamese forces and Thai military units became common, especially as the Vietnamese pursued Khmer Rouge fighters into Thai territory or fired across the border. Vietnam's long-term occupation created a protracted conflict. Despite its military strength, Vietnam faced stiff resistance from the Khmer Rouge and other anti-Vietnamese groups that received support from China and some Western countries. The war drained Vietnam's economy and isolated it diplomatically, particularly from the West and the ASEAN bloc. The occupation lasted a decade, and during that time, Cambodia became a fragmented battleground with multiple factions vying for control. Vietnamese forces remained engaged in both military operations and nation-building efforts, but struggled to achieve lasting stability. Their involvement deepened regional tensions and turned Cambodia into a focal point of Cold War rivalries that deeply affected relations with Thailand and the wider world. The conflict in Cambodia was deeply shaped by the wider context of Cold War politics, and ASEAN, formed in 1967 to promote regional stability, played a critical role in responding to the crisis. When Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1978 and installed a new government, ASEAN nations, particularly Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, viewed the action as a direct threat to regional sovereignty and balance. They feared that Vietnam, with backing from the Soviet Union, aimed to expand its influence across Indochina, undermining the independence of smaller nations and shifting the power dynamic in Southeast Asia. ASEAN countries did not recognize the Vietnamese-installed government in Cambodia, and instead continued to support the ousted Khmer Rouge regime's seat at the United Nations. Despite global awareness of its brutal record, this decision was not rooted in sympathy for the Khmer Rouge but in opposition to what ASEAN perceived as Vietnam's aggression. The alliance aligned itself with China, the United States, and Western powers, forming an unlikely coalition that sought to pressure Vietnam to withdraw and restore Cambodian sovereignty through diplomatic means. China, in particular, saw Vietnam as a Soviet proxy and supported anti-Vietnamese forces, including the Khmer Rouge, to counterbalance Soviet influence in the region. Thailand, as an ASEAN member and immediate neighbor of Cambodia, found itself at the heart of this geopolitical struggle. ASEAN's diplomatic strategy involved isolating Vietnam on the international stage while calling for a negotiated settlement that included all Cambodian factions. Conferences were held, resolutions passed, and diplomatic channels opened to create a political solution. However, real progress was slow due to deep mistrust and conflicting global interests. The Cambodian conflict, therefore, became a Cold War flashpoint in Southeast Asia, with ASEAN striving to uphold neutrality and independence amid the pressures of superpower, rivalry, and regional instability. The conflict between Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand during the late 20th century triggered one of the most significant refugee crises in Southeast Asia. Following the fall of the Khmer Rouge regime in 1979 and the subsequent Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia, hundreds of thousands of Cambodians fled their homes in search of safety. Many were escaping not only the violence of war but also famine, forced labor, political persecution, and the remnants of Pol Pot's brutal regime. Thailand, sharing a long border with Cambodia, became the main destination for these displaced people. Makeshift refugee camps sprang up rapidly along the Thai-Cambodian border, often in areas exposed to fighting and shelling. The camps, including well-known ones like Koh Adang and Site 2, became temporary homes for families who had endured unimaginable trauma. Conditions were harsh, with overcrowding, disease outbreaks, limited food supplies, and a constant sense of insecurity. International humanitarian organizations, including the United Nations and the Red Cross, mobilized quickly to provide aid, food, medical care, and protection. Yet the challenges were overwhelming. Many camps were located in contested zones where Khmer Rouge fighters and other rebel groups operated or sought refuge. This blurred the lines between civilians and combatants, complicating aid, delivery, and putting refugees at risk of being drawn back into conflict. Thailand, while initially offering refuge, struggled to manage the growing crisis. At times, it forcibly repatriated refugees or pushed them back across the border under pressure or for strategic reasons. The humanitarian impact extended beyond the camps. Entire generations of Cambodians grew up in exile, and psychological trauma lingered. The crisis highlighted the vulnerability of civilian populations caught in geopolitical conflicts and forced the global community to confront the human cost of war in a deeply divided and unstable region. In the end, the story of the battle between Cambodia and Thailand is not just about borders or battles, it is about people, politics, and the lasting wounds of conflict. It is a history shaped by fear and power, but also by survival and resilience. From the fall of the Khmer Rouge to the waves of refugees who crossed into Thailand, from Cold War rivalries to the brave efforts of humanitarian workers, every moment reflects a region struggling to find peace in the shadow of war. Though the guns eventually fell silent, the echoes of that era still shape the lives, memories, and relationships between nations today. By remembering this history, we honor those who endured it and remind ourselves of the human cost of conflict and the value of peace that must never be taken for granted.